And I'll go back and listen. I'll take notes while I am in the producer and host seat. Because let's be honest, the best position to be in is the room of improvement. And the best seat to be in for life is the seat of a student. So we're always learning if you're open to it. Life is the best teacher. There's a book. It's an old book. It's The Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn. And one of the opening things that she says in that book is man is not your enemy. Man is not your friend, for man is your teacher. And it's so true. If you are open to learning from any and everybody, whether it was a mistake, getting slapped across the face, getting spit on, you learn something from every single event in your life if you're open to it. And so those, I would say, are my 3 takeaways: is being organized, healing, and also learning how to network as well.
What's going on, guys? It's your Javi David St. Clair Speaks, and you are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
You are now tuned in to the St. Clair Speaks Show.
Welcome back to the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. I'm your host, Javi St. Clair, sitting down with another awesome guest, Portia, aka Portia the Producer. We're sitting down with Portia Booker, podcast host. I like to say philanthropist as well. We actually hit it off yesterday. We chit-chatted on one of these awesome introduction meetings that I love to do. And I'm like, man, Portia, you would actually be a great guest for my podcast. So for those of you that don't know, Portia has a huge background in podcasting and media and production as well. Executive producer and podcast host of the Groove with Portia podcast, with weekly uploads every Monday and Wednesday. Portia is also an advocate for mental health, and that is where we really hit it off. I love the conversation that me and Portia had yesterday. The only regret was our conversation wasn't recorded, so it was so good. I'm like, yo, Portia, I need you on the podcast as soon as possible. So this was one of those episodes that me personally, I wanted to get this episode in for the listeners, but also for the conversation in the space of the Black community. These are conversations that I don't have as often. And when I see someone that's passionate and that's an advocate for mental health and that's out here on Front Street really pushing the message, of course I got to have you on the pod. So with that being said, Portia, welcome to the St. Clair Speaks Show podcast. I know that introduction was quite lengthy, but tell us a little bit more about yourself, your brand, your business, and all the amazing work you've been doing in the podcasting industry.
Hey, Javi, first, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. So for those of you who do not know me, I am Portia Booker, is known as Portia the Producer. I'm the host and executive producer of Groove with Portia radio show and podcast. So my show started in October of 2019 as a way for me to build my self-confidence back up and also share my mental health journey. I was a former television producer for NBC. And what happened, of course, my breakdown led to my breakthrough to my true calling. And so now on my show, Groove with Portia, I focus on personal and professional growth. And I love to share stories of people who have overcome the odds like I did, where I was told I would always be on medication, never be able to achieve anything or reach the level that I am today. And so now I share my story in hopes of helping other people, especially in our community, right? Javi, I mean, you really hit on the fact that in communities of color, mental health is still viewed as taboo. And it's like the rates of suicide continue to go up, but our conversations continue to go down. And we need to flip flop that because more people need to step up. We got to do better in this arena, especially now where there's so much going on. We need to be mindful and not have a mind that is full of our surroundings, of ourselves, and also the things that we take in on a daily basis. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also in the process of writing 2 books. That's the first time I've ever openly shared that. I'm writing 2 books. One is my own personal journey, and the next one is about my grief journey. As we had talked yesterday, Javi, that I'm kind of dealing with grief right now after the loss of my mom. And that's a whole catalyst in itself when trying to maintain my own mental well-being and also going through the grief process as well. But I'm a firm believer that my mom's transition is for my transformation. I'm gonna say that again. Her transition is for my transformation. And I know that's another whole subject in itself with death, grief, transformation, transition, because still in our community, that trajectory or just death in itself is still viewed in only one aspect instead of just a multitude.
Quite the introduction. All right. So I'm excited to talk to you today. from that introduction alone, there's so many different points in where we could go in this conversation. So I like to, like play catch up, right? Obviously we met yesterday, we hit it off. Catch me up to where you're at right now. How did you get here? How did you carve the name Portia the Producer? How did you earn your stripes? And why are you so passionate about what you do?
How did I earn my stripes? To be honest with you, Javi, I was one of those lucky people who achieved everything. Let's jump back to 2016. That was the peak year for me. I got my dream internship. I traveled across the globe all the way to Cyprus. I graduated from college, my dream college, of course, and landed my dream job as a TV producer because in my heart, I knew I always wanted to produce television shows or be that executive producer that you see on TV, right? You always hear fire the producer whenever something goes wrong, right? But the producer, people don't realize that is the bridge between the host and the audience. The producer is the one that brings out your emotion. So if you've got a good producer, hold on to them. So when I embarked on my television journey in NBC, it just went downhill. I mean, the job wasn't what I wanted because let's be honest, Javi, a lot of us have reached that crossroad of I'm here at my dream job and then it flops. So now where do you go? What do you do? And for me, it was that shame. I couldn't go back to my family. I felt as though I could not talk to them about this job that I had worked so hard to get to. I couldn't tell them that things were not working out. And of course, my mental health had declined to the point that I couldn't even pay attention at work. I couldn't even focus. I couldn't connect to my coworkers. I felt numb. I was sad all the time. I was depressed on my days off. I mean, I worked overnights. I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sunday through Thursday, so I only had one day off a week. And your schedule, if people are in the TV business, your schedule dictates your social life. And I'm a social butterfly. I'm an introverted ambivert, so I need my social time. And when I realized that was the end for me, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Trigger warning for people who are sensitive. I tried to end my own life, Yahavi. I did. I tried to commit suicide in March of 2017 because one, I was ashamed of what I was going through. Two, I grew up in a household full of strong women. And we've talked about this before. The strong Black woman cape is a negative connotation to me for a lot of women of color. And that to me continues to infest and hinder our growth as Black women because we have to be the strong one all the time. But let's be honest, we're not supposed to be strong all the time. We should be vulnerable people. But I grew up with that same halo ingrained in my system. And that day in March, I'm still thankful. I'm still thankful to this day to my work mom who caught on my text messages. And she's like, Portia, you take your Black A to that hospital right now because you're unwell. You need help. And I listened, Javi. I did. I mean, as stubborn as a mule as I can be, I listened to her, went to the hospital. And while I was in there, I just took time to really evaluate okay, I know that there's more to my life than this. So the only thing that died on March 20th, 2017 was me living the life that other people wanted for Portia. I took the author pen back and my healing journey began then. And so I moved back home. Once I moved back home, I started to get myself together, and the door of opportunity opened for me to have my own show, which is Grew with Portia. Now, Portia the Producer is the new name that I go under because I've always wanted to be a producer and I found my worth. I've finally learned to own my craft, to be confident in the skin that I'm in, confident in my abilities, and I don't need to have somebody else dictate my worth based on a paycheck, based on a role at work. I've created it for myself. So that's where Portia the Producer came from and also where I'm at today.
Okay. I had to take a couple notes. So I want to swing back to something that you mentioned, and we talked about this deep yesterday. And that was the other thing that I'm like, man, like this would make a really good podcast conversation, right? When you mentioned being the strong Black woman, right, and wearing the cape, it's you touch on something that is so true, yet you don't hear people talk about it. It's kind of like, oh yeah, you're a strong black woman, so disregard your mental health. Yeah, be the emotional punching bag. Disregard your well-being. And you were at a point where you said enough is enough. I want to address this. Can you dive in a little bit on that, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I hope my little sisters are listening, because this is something that often gets swept under the rug, right? Disregarded for something that's not that important, right? As women, you're natural nurturers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Putting someone else first, that usually happens a lot. So you decided to put you first, and it paid off.
Yes, 100%. Putting you first is not selfish. We've got to learn that our self worth is not dictated by other people's view or perception of us. And let's be honest, Yahavi, growing up in a black household, when you got big mama, grandma, mother, everybody else, the things that they've overcame and the way that they've done things, being the nurturer for the whole family, their husband, being the carpet for a lot of shenanigans that it goes on in our household. I don't need to go over everything. They've ingrained that into their daughters and granddaughters because in their mind, it was a safety net for them. But let's be honest, over time, water trickles down, not up. So if that toxicity is constantly being ingrained, that creates generational curses, that stunts growth, that also continues to keep that cycle of poverty ingrained in our mind. Because let's be honest, the strong black woman, how many black women have to continue to be too strong to the point that they no longer know how to advocate for themselves? They're strong for everybody else, but not for them. And the minute that they take their shoe off and say, you know what, enough is enough, then I'm called, oh, you're no good. You're nagging. You're this. You're too much of that. You've already got 3 or 4 strikes put against you based on society's standards and principles. So I may as well take my own footing back and learn to be an individual, be somebody bigger than what society deems me to be the true person that God, the universe, or whatever deems for me. So when I did that, Yahavi, it took a lot of wrestling. I had to wrestle that limiting belief of what would people think of me? What would my family think? What would my friends think? Will people stand by me? And people are going to walk away from you. They are. But the thing of it is, let's be honest, that's part of life. Life is a revolving door. Life is the best teacher that we could ever have. And you're going to, at different stages of your life, you're going to lose people because you're going to transition and you're going to change. But that's what life is about. It's a journey, and you're going to meet the people who need to be in your life who appreciate who you truly are. And let's be honest, not all the time our families, they mean well, but they don't always appreciate us changing. In their mind, we're supposed to stay that same carpet that we've always been. But then when we become assertive, assertiveness is viewed as aggressiveness, and it's not. Assertiveness is you finally taking your power back as a woman, as a person of worth.
And that is something. It's interesting because I interviewed this gentleman yesterday, Phil Johnson, and you know he has his entire brand and business is about emotional intelligence. And you said something that he mentioned yesterday. He said, taking your energy back, right? Taking your energy back, and not having people drain you of your energy. And you mentioned, it's kind of like you mentioned like the same thing of like being the carpet, right? You always having to be there for people. When you do that, you're always going to push yourself second. You're in your energy second. So the point where it's like, what they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's kind of like getting back into pouring into you. So I want to talk to you about that life-changing moment back with March 2017, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Back in
Correct. Yes.
2017. What was that experience like for you? Because I know that was tough, right? Like that had to be I mean, you could probably tell us better than I could describe it, but tell us a little bit. Like, I know that is a trigger for some people, but I think one of the best things about it is you have this open space to talk about it and how you overcame. So I love to hear that story.
Yeah, March 2017, when I wanted to end my life, when I remember that day like it was yesterday. I mean, I can still remember walking into the newsroom. I already felt worthless. I already was at the lowest of the low. I didn't care anymore about life. But what people don't realize is one of the things with suicide, you have a euphoric period because you know that you're already done with everything else. So that euphoria comes because you're excited to finally alleviate the pain of some sort. And so there was that happiness that I felt, but it wasn't true happiness. So I go into the newsroom. I, of course, am anticipating getting yelled at, of course, doing something wrong, screwing up, which, of course, that ended up happening. I just remember, and I still get emotional about this, the senior producer literally ripped me another one in front of the whole newsroom. And that public humiliation for me triggered my childhood traumas to resurface because I was bullied as a kid. So it was almost like the burning witches at the stake type of thing in the 1800s. And so when that happened, Yahavi, the damage was done. That was the icing on the cake for me to say, you know what? If this is all that life is going to deliver me, I'd rather not even be here. Screw all of this. So I remember getting up from my seat, walking to the dressing room, and I just cried. I cried my heart out. And I've always wrestled with crying. Growing up with all boys, there's kind of that wrestling of if you cry and show emotion, it's viewed as weakness. And I think a lot of Black women have that just from that strong Black woman connotation that continues to be bred through them from generations. And I finally pulled myself together, but then I said, you know what? I'm done. So after my shift ended at 7 o'clock, we had our debriefing after the news aired. I had already packed my book bag. My desk was already empty, everything. And while I'm driving down Riverside Drive, because I lived out of state at that time, I lived in Oklahoma then. And while I'm driving down Riverside, I see the Oklahoma bridge that's above the Arkansas River. And I go over there and I was texting my work mom at the time. Whatever I said to her, she picked it up immediately. Whatever I said, I might have said, I'm going to end it all. I'm tired, whatever. But I knew I had that intention of jumping off of that bridge because one, nobody would find me. Two, I wouldn't have to answer to my family about the shame, the guilt of why I could not succeed in this position that I worked so hard to get to. Because let's be honest, Shahavi, I was one of those lucky people who got their dream job, had the job, fly them down there, do an in-person interview, put them in a 5-star hotel, pay for all their meals, everything. That was how my dream job got me or bought me. And now it's turned into a complete nightmare. And I'm thankful to this day that my work mom picked up on what I said because obviously my story wasn't supposed to end then. I actually have a tattoo on my shoulder that says, "Don't write your ending." Because on that day, I realized that I took the author pen back and I'm in control of my destiny now. Nobody else is in control of Portia's destiny. And so, for your listeners who are tuning in, I know many people have been at that crossroad where I've been, where they're tired of what's going on, but also they're not sure of another way out. And let's be honest, in our community, we are not taught about mental wellness until we have that breakdown. Because I remember, and no fault to my own mother, when I first started to get depressed in high school, I tried to say something to her, but the only thing that she could meet me with was, "You better take your depressed A somewhere else and read that Bible." So oftentimes we're met with those things. And don't get me wrong, Yahavi, our parents we have to remember they were victims too of some sort. And so, because we're dealing with our own mental traumas and mental well being, if they've never been taught how to maintain their own, they're going to respond in the best way that they know possible.
Man, if you said a word, that's the word right there. I'll tell you that. That is just it's so touching. It's very relatable because, again, there are people that's going through exactly that, right? They feel that they're at the crossroads. This is it. And you said, taking the pen back and writing your story, right? Yeah, right. Write your own story. I mean, you have complete control of the outcome. So I want to talk to you about teachable moments. Teachable moments is one of my favorite questions I love asking on my show. In the industry of podcasting, radio, again, like you're someone that well qualified, earned your stripes, have a lot of credibility. What have been some teachable moments for you in radio and podcasting and being a producer, and what has that taught you along the way?
The biggest one is how to be organized.
Mm.
And the reason why it's how to be organized, because as of right now, my show, my radio interviews are booked out through 2022. I'm booking in 2023. So I have to keep a master calendar of all my guests, all their topics. That way I'm not repeating things. So, one, being organized. Number two, really determining what I want my listeners to get from every episode that I produce. Because when you're aware of those things, you're able to, one, keep yourself happy, two, keep your listeners happy, three, for me, it's been very rewarding and healing because I started Grew with Portia as a way for me to build my self-confidence and also share my mental health journey. So throughout all this trial and error of finding my footing on Grew with Portia, it has been very rewarding to be able to help heal myself and heal other people. It's kind of like, you can say, my own ministry. Next thing I would say, it really teaches me how to network with people because I'm not only just providing my platform for them to share their story, I'm also even evaluating how their area of expertise can help me in my own life from what they share on my show. And so a lot of times, Javi, I go back and listen to my own interviews. I still do. I know some podcasters don't. I have almost 150, maybe more episodes that I've released of Grew with Portia, and I'll go back and listen. I'll take notes while I am in the producer and host seat. Because let's be honest, the best position to be in is the room of improvement. And the best seat to be in for life is the seat of a student. So we're always learning if you're open to it. Life is the best teacher. There's a book, it's an old book. It's The Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn. And one of the opening things that she says in that book is, man is not your enemy. Man is not your friend, for man is your teacher. And it's so true. If you are open to learning from any and everybody, whether it was a mistake, getting slapped across the face, getting spit on, you learn something from every single event in your life if you're open to it. And so those, I would say, are my three takeaways: is being organized, healing, and also learning how to network as well. Because podcasting, being a show host, you learn a lot. You do if you're open to it. And it's my passion. I couldn't see myself doing anything else other than being a radio show host, producer. And also, I apply the same principles to my own life: maintaining organization, really determining, does each relationship serve me when I'm talking to somebody on an intro call? Because not every single person who I do an introduction call with, I'm like, okay, this was nice, but I don't see them on my show. So really learning to be picky and choosy about each relationship and each network.
And that is a word right there. Couple things I want to swing back to. Let's talk about networking and relationships. We met through a mutual connection, someone that was featured on the podcast. Shout outs to Don for making that happen. But that's something I definitely agree on. Like, I value my this is something I've been saying recently, right? Relationships are more important than money, right? Not all relationships need to be transactional. So yesterday, like towards the end of our introduction call, like when we were in a call, he's like, "Well, Javi, is anything you can help me with?" I'm like, I don't know, but I'll cash in on a favor at some point, right? I'll ask you for something further down the line, which is not a transactional thing. So for me, I like to create relationships of value where it's not just one sided, right? Where it's just, okay, I have someone on the show. No, I could be on your show, you could be on my show, we could talk about XYZ, and there's all this other stuff that we talked about offline. Um, but you really cherishing relationships. Just to swing back to your story about back in March 2017, you had someone reach out to you, right? Someone knew something was wrong. I want to talk to you about valuable relationships, having relationships of value, right? People that you could turn to, like I like to say your power circle. People that won't allow you to have that off day and that negative self-talk. Like, Portia, don't talk to yourself like that. You know what I mean? Tell us about um, your personal and professional relationships and things that you've learned in the relationships that you have.
So I'll be honest, Yahavi, my personal and professional circle, they fall under the same umbrella. I know for some people, they don't. But I can say for me, my close inner circle of personal and professional friends, mentors, they know my personal life. They do. They know the good, the bad, and the ugly. I can hang the dirty laundry flag outside and they know it's me. I have no filter with them. I'm able to be vulnerable. But I used to not be somebody who was vulnerable because, again, I had that limiting belief that vulnerability was weakness. But once I was able to work through that, then I was able to, one, start to trust again, two, be vulnerable and share my own story of struggle, because everybody poops. Everybody. Every single one of us. So we have to remember that nobody is better than anybody. Nobody is too elite where they don't go to the bathroom. And number three, and just asking for help. The fact that my work mom, still shout out to Sarah. Shout out to Sarah Sweeta. I love you to pieces. Thank you again for saving my life. We still talk to this day. And I met her in college. I never had her as a professor. She was a professor and she still is, but I never had her. But we just built that close relationship. And because of that, she's been here for me through thick and thin, even now that my mom has transitioned to her next assignment. So when you're building those relationships, it has to be in alignment. It has to be organic. And it can't be a tit for tat ordeal, because I think a lot of times we go into the networking space with our intentions might be good, but the way that it come across is not always the way that we intended it. So for me, it's my personal and professional relationships are like this. And I talk to them every day. Another thing I want to add too is you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. And if I want to be a better person, I need somebody on my team or in my circle who's smarter than me. I need somebody like that. I also need somebody who's not as up to par as me, but I'm also able to pour into them so they can be the best version of themselves too. And I don't expect anything in return. I do it out the kindness of my heart, because I'm a firm believer when you do something from the heart, you'll always be rewarded. It doesn't always have to be monetary. And that's the thing. We need to get out of that mentality that everything that we do is supposed to come with a monetary transaction. I'll use a simple example, Yahavi. I met somebody who's in the alternative healing space. They do Reiki and all of these energy working healing modalities. When they found out about my mom passing away, I invited them on my show to share their journey of healing, because my show Grew with Portia is about personal and professional growth. And I love people who shed light on different ways of addressing mental wellness challenges. And so when I invited them on, they gifted me with a Reiki session. Now, we know Reiki sessions are not cheap. Reiki sessions can be between $180 something and up, depending on the type of it is, depending on the length, etc. I didn't expect that from them. I wanted them to come on my show and share their journey and what they do to help more people to heal. So just using that example really is how relationships and networking should be. Don't expect anything. Don't. The first thing that you do is, when you're building a network or when you're building a relationship, use your gift to help somebody else. That should be the very first thing on the pedestal to me. And that's what I do now. When I meet with people, I'm like, how can I help support you? I don't ask them to support me because I got people in my circle that are millionaires and billionaires. I do, but I have not asked them for a cent. I'm going to say that again. I've not asked them for a cent because I value the relationship that we have.
I want to swing to something that you mentioned earlier, like in the introduction stage of this interview. You mentioned, yeah, I'm writing 2 books, and I'm going to openly say that. I'm like, all right, awesome. Now that you put that out there, what type of podcast host would I be if I didn't ask about the process of writing a book? You mentioned 2 books you're writing, correct? One more so autobiography about your life, and the other is about the grieving process you mentioned. So, what is it like in the process right now? What is it like writing a book? What are you learning? What do you love about it? What do you hate about it? I'm curious to know how that process is going for you.
So I'll be very transparent, Yahavi. The 2 books that I'm writing, the second one will be done first, but it won't come out first. The writing process for me has been very therapeutic because right now I am currently in therapy, and that's another thing I wanted to really touch on is how therapy is very effective if you find the right therapist. And my therapist found me. I'm thankful to God that they did because them coming into my life during this very vulnerable and transformative time in my life has been pivotal in the last couple weeks that I've been working with them. And one of the things that they had me to do was start to write every single day. Write every day your emotions. They sent me a feelings wheel and they said, use this when you're talking about your grief. Really bleed on paper. Literally bleed on paper everything that you're feeling, whether you're angry, whether you're sad, whether you're content, everything. So back to my books. Both of my books that I'm working on right now, they needed this interruption in my life to happen because I have to feel. I have to really bring up some of those emotions that are painful, like what I mentioned about my TV experience. That's going to be in my book, obviously in more detail in that, but I have to feel those feelings. So the good thing is I'm able to heal myself during this process of writing 2 books because they both coincide, but they're both very different. Next thing is I'm able to really learn who I am, what I like, what I don't like, and the lessons I wish that I would have known when I was going through some of these things like I am currently. Number 3, I'd say the main thing that I tend to not like sometimes is the tediousness sometimes of writing because sometimes creativity leaves you. Sometimes you don't want to visit those emotions because they're too painful. I don't always want to talk about, things dealing with my TV experience because it ignites several emotions. Several of them are fighting for center stage. They all want to be the comedian of the hour. And we know that that's exhausting when one minute you're sad, the next minute you're angry, then you're depressed, then you're happy. It's a cluster of emotions. So that's the one thing I will say that I don't like about this process, but I'm grateful that I'm able to do it because, again, I'm a firm believer that everything in our life happens for a reason at the right time.
I'm so glad we had the opportunity to connect because um, this is a really great discussion. So you mentioned something. Of course, I want to swing back to. You made a good point about therapy. I want to talk to you about therapy in the Black community. Where, where do you see? You mentioned some benefits of like writing and the emotional wheel and all that good stuff, but from the outside looking in, you prior to therapy versus you now in the therapy process. Um, Kind of like the same question of teachable moments. What are you gaining from the experience, and what do you think someone else could gain from the experience of, uh, you know, meeting with the therapist and starting that process?
So I want to add some context really quick, Yahavi. This is my 4th therapist who I'm working with. I've fired 3 therapists in my whole endeavor of being in the mental wellness space. And I want to really tell people that your health care is yours. Okay. Your healthcare is your responsibility. So if you're with a therapist, if you've been with them for 5, 10, 15 years and you're not seeing results, you really need to question that relationship. You do. And really determine, is this person really adding to my mental well-being, or are they just being a babysitter of my emotions? Yeah, I'm going to be blunt about that because I'm sick and tired of seeing people get cheated and not elevate to their best selves because they're comfortable being with somebody. But you have to be in the room of improvement to grow. You have to embrace the uncomfortable like a hug. And so for me, the one teachable thing that I'm learning right now in therapy is writing is so beneficial because it helps you to process so many emotions, so many thoughts, because you don't realize how much we take in 5 minutes. We could be on social media, then open an email, then the radio cuts on, then the dog starts barking, you hear people in your neighborhood chit chat, da 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 da. We don't realize how much we take into our brain. Once again, I said, don't have a mind that is full. Be mindful of your thoughts. Be mindful of everything that you ingest because what you digest dictates how you dress. I'm going to say it again. What you digest dictates how you dress. And that also dictates how you show up for people. So, one, writing being beneficial. Two, being honest and transparent. Because let's be honest, Javi, I got to say it. In our community, we are not transparent about what we're truly feeling. We are not vulnerable because we're afraid. Don't be afraid. If that therapist is working for your benefit, they will keep what you say in confidence. They will. And you can say that to them. It's your health care, but they should be helping you to get better, not just listening to you like the babysitter of your emotion. I'm going to keep saying that again. Number three, for me on this journey, I'm sharing it openly on my podcast, on my radio show. I've been very transparent. I know some people may see that as twofold. Some people might see that as me seeking attention. No, I'm not. Other people might see that as me being too raw, but I'm not because I grew up in a household that was blunt. And if you're not going to give it to me blunt or straight, don't give it to me at all. It's how I look at it. And we have to come at people with that approach sometimes. If you want to get better, you have to do better. And if my transparency of sharing my journey thus far and currently being in therapy is going to help somebody and encourage somebody else to take ownership of their mental well being, I'm going to continue to do it because we have to shed light on this. Therapy does work and you can shop around. You can. Another thing I want to add really quick to you, Javi, is it's easier to find a bad therapist than it is to find a good one. I hate to say it, but it's so true. And when you're looking for a therapist, I recommend you really do your research on the area of your life you want to work in. Really question their credentials when you're looking on whether it's Psychology Today or, Therapy for Black Girls. I love that podcast, by the way. Dr. Joy Harden Bradford is amazing. When you're doing your research, really determine the area that you want to work in with this therapist and ask them in your initial meeting with them, ask them, how much experience do you have in this area? Because that will tell you a lot. And if they kind of get a little snippy, then that might tell you a lot about their practice. That might. And it's not like you're questioning their credentials. I mean, you can Google their name and see where they went to school, where they're licensed, etc. But still, and ask questions. That's the one thing I will say. No question in my mind is a stupid question. And the answer is always no until you ask. So ask those tough questions, people.
Yeah, definitely do your due diligence on therapists for sure. See, that was my thing about therapy. Like for me, it's like we talked about this offline yesterday, right? About I mentioned like the George Floyd and like some of the trauma that I felt in that moment, right? So for me, in real life scenarios like that, I can't take that type of trauma and go talk to a white male therapist. It's unrelatable, right? You can't understand. You, I need, for me, it's like I need that representation, right? So my therapist has to be a Black man. This has to be, right? So for me, it's like a whole bunch of things that come with being a Black man, right? And you said something too earlier in the pod, where it's like us in the community, it's like it's kind of like on paper it looks like we start at a deficit or something like that. Maybe I'm just paraphrasing it, but we have so much going against us, right? Just starting out. Um, the best thing for us to do is always the best thing for us to do for us, for ourselves. And definitely therapy is one of those things. So for me, it's always been about representation. So you're totally right about finding the right fit. And you said you fired 3 or 4 therapists prior to the one that you have now. So yeah, I'm putting that energy out there. So I'm manifesting the right therapist for me. Um,
Well, I want to
definitely
add
manifesting that.
to
Yeah.
Javi really quick. Don't just fire your therapist right off the bat. Really ask yourself those tough questions of how long have I been working with this therapist? Have I seen any growth within myself or within my progress? And even ask the therapist, have you seen any growth within me? And determine what your next action step should be from there. Now, I'm somebody who will not take medication. I've been medication free, prescription med free for the last 3 years. And, people should really question also and do their research on the medications that they're taking, because a lot of those side effects will shock you. If you really read into them, read into what's in those medications and how they impact your thoughts, how they impact other physical parts of your body, really do your research. And yes, Javi, I did fire 3. I did. The first one over medicated me. The other 2 were culturally insensitive. And I would say, even if you want a therapist who quote unquote looks like you even have to be careful with that. And here's why. Because you can have somebody who looks like you, but if they grow up in a socially, economically advantaged household, they may not have the same empathetic approach that you do when you encounter, for example, community violence, such as a George Floyd situation. They might see it very different. They might say, well, just get over it. So again, I wouldn't just pull the cultural card of somebody looking just like me, because my therapist, I can say, looks like me, but they are not somebody who grew up the same way as me. I can honestly say that. And the fact that this person met me at this pivotal time of my life, and they met me on a level and with a language I understood, says a lot. And their approach to doing therapy with me is more of what I call DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a more coaching approach of therapy versus cognitive behavioral therapy. So again, you can shop around for your different type of therapy needs in that, but I just wanted to put that out there, that not all the time somebody who looks like you is going to understand you.
That's a very good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's very true. Sometimes that gets overlooked a lot, right? A lot. So we had a lot of. This is one of those interviews where it's like, man, like, yeah, we're towards the end already. With so much good talking points. Um, if we could gift wrap everything and bow tie it, what would you say is the takeaway message you want the viewers and the listeners to take away from hearing your story of how you overcame and you um, became who you are today? What would that takeaway message be for the listeners today?
Don't be afraid to start over. When somebody tells you you can't do something, prove them wrong. You have every tool within you to be successful. Next, your mental wellness is your wealth. I'm going to say that again. Your mental wellness is your wealth. You need to take charge of your mental health. If that includes taking a mental health day from work, don't be ashamed of it. I have what's called a mental health self care SOP, which SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures. It's a technical term. I have that in my phone for when I'm having those mentally trying days and I need to take a break. I crack open that self care SOP and I pick an activity that will bring me back to life within an hour's time that I can do at home. So, really incorporate self care into your daily routine, and it will be a game changer for you.
All right. So where can we number one, where can we stream your podcast? Where can we follow and subscribe to everything that you have going on, Portia?
So, of course, you can find me on Instagram. I'm Portia_Hugs. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook at Portia Booker. My podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Spreaker. I'm on like 8 different platforms, but if you just type in Groove with Portia in the Google search, you will be able to find it. And I release episodes every Monday and Wednesday. And in September, going to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you get the triple dosage of Groove with Portia every week.
Awesome. Man, this was a lot of fun. Like I always say, what good is information if we don't apply it? However you consume this content today, whether you was watching or just streaming this all the way straight through, your mental health is an investment, not an expense, right? So pour back into you, put that me time, put yourself in your own calendar and prioritize yourself and show up for yourself because you're worthy of it. With all that being said, I want to thank you for watching. This is the St. Clair Speak Show. I'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you, Javi.